Hello there and welcome back to the So You Picked series, Job Edition, where we look into your toolkit up to level 60, how and where to get your Jobstone, and a quick look at your job gauge. Now, today we are going to be looking at the Paladin, one of the two original tank classes in the game, and it is more on the defensive side of tanking, using their shield and skills to reduce the amount of damage taken. It's quite easy to learn and quite dependable, even if some people find it quite boring, but like everything else, it's better to make your own opinion on it. So Rain, grab a gear and let's get going. Fair point, come on, let's go. So, before we jump into unlocking Paladin, we're going to have a quick look at the rest of the Gladiator skills, starting off with Rage of Halone at level 26. Now, this is a weapon skill, and it will deliver an attack with a potency of 100, and it will combo off of Riot Blade, and it is the third part of your main combo. It will be Fast Blade, Riot Blade, then Rage of Halone. And if you do the whole combo, it will boost the potency to 350. Nice and easy stuff. Now next up, level 38, you will get Sentinel. Now, Sentinel will reduce your damage taken by 30% for a duration of 15 seconds. Quite a powerful one. You can recast that every 2 minutes, and it is your first Paladin-specific defensive cooldown. Up until now, you should have been using Rampart. You would keep Rampart on, and you would add Sentinel into the mix as well as a second defensive cooldown. And lastly, at level 50, you will get Circle of Scorn. Now, Circle of Scorn is an AoE attack ability. It will deliver an attack with a potency of 120 to all nearby enemies, and has an additional effect of adding a damage over time to the enemies at a potency of 35, and that damage over time will last for 15 seconds. And you can recast Circle of Scorn every 25 seconds. Very cool, just even for single target as well. Very cool ability. Now we're caught up with the Gladiator skills. Role skill wise, they all have their uses. But my tank essentials will be keeping Rampart, keeping Low Blow, should have replaced Shield Bash with Low Blow already, and Provoke from the early Gladiator days, and add in Reprisal and Arm's Length when you can. Now, Reprisal is an AoE debuff which reduces the damage dealt by all enemies hit by it by 10% for 10 seconds, and you can use that every 60 seconds. It is super handy for large pulls and bosses alike. Pretty much use it whenever it's available. And lastly, Arm's Length, which is both a buff and debuff at the same time, which creates a barrier around you for 6 seconds, preventing most knockback and drawing effects, which is very useful in certain bosses, but it also has the additional effect of adding a 20% slow debuff to any enemy that hits you in that 5-second window when you've got the shield up. Now, normally when people read slow, they usually think of movement speed and just completely disregard Arm's Length. However, in Final Fantasy XIV, slow doesn't actually mean movement speed, it means attack speed. So as the enemies attack you when you've got the shield on, their attack speed will be slowed for 15 seconds, meaning you will take less damage because it takes them longer to actually hit you. Now, in my opinion, it is a massively underrated role skill, and it's best used either as you're pulling a large group of mobs into position when your healer can't always heal you on the run, and popping Arm's Length while you're on the run will help them out quite a bit. Or you can also pop it just after you've got the mob into position, which will hit more of the enemies, but that will depend on the dungeon that you're in. Sometimes it's better to use it when you're on the run, sometimes it's better to use it when you've got everything settled. It's a case-by-case thing. You'll learn pretty much when the best time to use it is. Now, boss-wise, not really worth using Arm's Length on them for the slow debuff, as bosses tend to be resistant to slow and heavy and stuff like that. So it is best to save Arm's Length for any push-pull mechanics that the bosses have. It's mostly the trials that you'll be using it in boss-wise, but I would definitely recommend using it. It is a massively underrated skill. So, your level 30 rotation will remain the same as you've been doing up to now, the only additions being Rage of Halone and Reprise. Now, if you want to pull from range, lead off with a shield lob, following by a total eclipse or two to get a good initial hold. Once you've finished gathering enemies, if the mob is more than 3, keep using total eclipse. If it's less than 3, it is better to cycle through the mob by using left or right on the D-pad on controller, or holding shift and then pressing tab on the keyboard for PC users, and use your Rage of Halone combo on each enemy individually, making sure to keep Fight or Flight and Reprise on cooldown, and using Rampart as and when you need it, with it having a longer cooldown timer. Nice and easy stuff. So with that being so simple, I figured I'd add in some just general tanking tips. So, number 1, your tank stance. Now, this one's straightforward. At the start of a dungeon, make sure you have your tank stance turned on, as it will turn itself off if you get synced below your current level. For Paladin, your tank stance will be the Iron Will. Number 2, check out your group. Now, similar to healers, while you're waiting to start the dungeon, it is worth having a look at your party's gear and party's makeup as well, because those can both affect how much you can get away with pulling. If your healer is undergeared, for example, they'll generally have weaker heals and won't be able to keep up with the amount of damage that you'll be taking with a large pull. So you'll need to be prepared to adjust for that. Likewise, with the DPS, the melee jobs, for example, don't start getting their AoE abilities till mid to late 30s. So a larger pull will take longer for melee DPS to kill the mob, which will, by default, add more strain on to the group as a whole as well. Another thing that's worth keeping an eye on is your healer's magic points, especially just after a fight, because that can affect the size of your next pull as well. Generally though, if they are around the 5,000 magic points mark, then you should be okay with a larger pull. If not, then it is sometimes worth holding back a little bit while their magic points recover. Now, I will add, never just stand still and do nothing while you wait for it to recover. Always be moving forward, even if you have to just pull some small groups while it recovers, and then go straight into a larger group after that when it gets up to a good level. Number 3, speak up. Now, don't be afraid to tell the group that you're new to tanking or a bit unsure about tanking, because 99% of the time the rest of your group will offer advice and be pretty chill with any mistakes you make. So don't be afraid to speak up, and don't be afraid to ask questions either. That's another thing that people forget to do. If you're unsure about something, ask a question. Number 4, remember your ABCs. Now, try to use ABC position as much as you can. Now, if you don't know what I mean, or you missed my Gladiator video, where I explained it initially, I will do a quick recap for you right now. ABC positioning is where you try to keep the mob or boss in between you and the rest of the group. Generally, it's a straight line. So it will be in position A will be you, the tank. The enemy will be position B, and the rest of your group will be in position C, which will keep most of the damage facing away from your group. Now, that being said, it is not always possible, because other party members can position themselves in some less than ideal spots. But try and do it as much as you can. Number 5, push yourself. Now, try and pull as many enemies as you feel comfortable with, but on the other hand, don't be afraid to push it a little bit, because with practice you can do some very large pulls in most of the dungeons and survive quite well. If you don't, however, if you don't survive, don't worry. Failure is okay as long as you learn from it. Just dust yourself off, try again, and adjust accordingly. Number 6, be adaptable. Now, sometimes things in dungeons just don't go smoothly. Be it a melee DPS that stands in front of the boss with you and ends up getting smacked in the face and taking massive damage if they even survive the hit, or enemies not going where you want them to go, just be prepared to adapt to random stuff and you'll generally be fine. So with that being said, it's time to go unlock the Paladin. So let's head back to Uldar and we'll end up back at the Gladiator Guild to see Emilia to pick up her quest. Now, to unlock the Jobstone, you will need to have done the following things. Firstly, you will need to be level 30 in your start class, in this case, Gladiator. Secondly, you'll need to be past the main story quest called Self-Management. A lot of people miss that one. And lastly, you will need to have done all of the class quests up to level 30, and that last level 30 class quest will send you to your Jobstone giver, and ultimately, your Jobstone. And that last level 30 quest will take us to go and see Jenlin's upstairs here in Uldar. Now the quickest way to get to him is by taking the Chamber of Rule Ethernet teleport. It will drop you right by him, nice and straightforward. Now finish his quests and you will be the proud owner of your Paladin Jobstone and your first job ability. Now once you have your Jobstone, you will need to equip it by coming down into the character menu where all your gear is, and coming down all the way down to the bottom right hand slot, your soul crystal slot, and equipping the Soul of the Paladin. And now congratulations, you are now officially a Paladin with a messed up hotbar. Now you can either fix it manually by dropping the skills back on from the actions and traits menu, but to sort it out quickly, I'd suggest using these text commands that I'm putting on screen right now. And now what those do is copy your Gladiator hotbar over to your Paladin hotbar, making it nice and simple. So now this is where we're going to split it up a little bit, and we're going to look at the toolkit up to level 50, then we're going to have a look at the Paladin rotation at level 50, nice and straightforward, and then we're going to jump into the level 50 to 60 stuff, and lastly the level 60 rotation. So if you're not interested in the level 50 stuff, skip to this time code right here, and it will take you straight to the level 50 to 60 stuff. Right guys, so straight into the level 30 to 50 toolkit. Starting off at level 30 with Spirits Within. Now Spirits Within will deliver an attack with a potency of 100 to your enemy. Now the potency will increase up to 370 as your own health points nears maximum. So when you're nearly full health, the potency of Spirits Within will be boosted to 370. Now it is instant cast, and you can use that every 30 seconds. Now it does get an additional effect which will restore MP, and that comes off a trait at level 58. Now it sounds strange to be getting a restore MP additional effect, but by the time you get the trait, you'll understand why you get that restore MP bonus. Now next up, level 35, you will unlock two things, first of which being your more advanced job gauge. Now it will look like something like this. Now it is essentially a bar that will fill up over the course of battle. Specifically, every time your character does an auto attack, it will increase that bar by 5 points up to a maximum of 100. Now you'll use those points for your level 35 ability that you unlock called Sheltron. Now Sheltron is a defensive cooldown, and it will block incoming attacks for 4 seconds, and it will cost 50 Oath Gauge points in order to cast it. You can use Sheltron kind of like an extension to your other defensive cooldowns. Sentinel and Rampart comes in quite handy. As a general rule, I'll try and use Sheltron whenever I reach 85 points on the Oath Gauge. That's a good balance for me. You might want to push it up to 90 should you feel the need to. I find 85 points gives me enough time to generate another one should I need another Sheltron use fairly quickly. Now next up, at level 40, you will get the second and final part of the AoE combo called Prominence. Now Prominence will deliver an attack with a potency of 100 to all nearby enemies. Now it will combo with Total Eclipse, so you'd use Total Eclipse, then Prominence. If you do it in the full combo, that potency will increase to 220. And next up, level 45, you will get Cover. Now Cover is the second ability that you can use your Oath Gauge for. That will have a recast of 2 minutes, and what that does is it will take all damage intended for another party member for a duration of 12 seconds. And again, that will cost 50 Oath Gauge points. Now, it can only be executed when your chosen party member is closer than 10 yards. Now, 10 yards is basically melee range. If you have a melee DPS, that's generally the range that you're going for with Cover. And it does not activate with certain attacks. So certain attacks you won't cover, basically you won't take the damage from certain attacks. Generally, as regards to its use, I don't use it very often. You'll mostly be using Cover on other tanks in the high level content where you have 2 tanks. And lastly, at level 50, you will get access to Hallowed Ground. Now, Hallowed Ground is a defensive cooldown, and it will render you invincible to most attacks. There are some mechanics that will destroy you regardless of whether you have popped Hallowed Ground or not. Now that buff will last for 10 seconds, but it has a monster recast time of 7 minutes. Do use it wisely. However, on the other hand, still don't just let it sit there for an oh shit moment. By all means use it, because it's the waste of a good skill otherwise. And that is your level 50 toolkit. And sadly, your rotation will pretty much remain the same as it has been since level 30. All the tanking rules remain the same. Just add in the roll skill arm's length, either as you are pulling and on the run, or just after you get the mob settled into position for maximum results. If the pack is larger than 3 enemies, use your defensive cooldowns to mitigate some of the damage, but don't use them all at once. Now I tend to use Sentinel first as it has a longer cooldown timer. Then use Rampart after it runs out. Using Sheltron whenever it's available until the pack is dead or one of your defensives comes off cooldown. On the damage side of things, use Reprisal and Fight or Flight whenever they're available. Hit them with a Circle of Scorn and then spam them with Prominence combos. If the pack is less than 3, same as before, cycle through them, hitting them with Rage of Halone's combos, and use Spirits Within whenever available. Oh, and still use Circle of Scorn because it's awesome. For bosses, defensive wise, use Sheltron and Reprisal whenever you can, and try to save Sentinel or Rampart for the tank buster moves, which are generally the ones that target you and have a cast bar. But if you do feel that you need to use one outside of tank busters, then by all means do so, because you can't tank if you run out of health points. Attack wise, use Fight or Flight whenever available still, hit them with Spirits Within whenever you can, preferably when you have high health points for that extra damage, and then go ham with your Rage of Halone combos on it. So that is all the level 50 stuff. Now let's jump into the 50 to 60 stuff. Right guys, so your level 50 to 60 toolkit, I'm going to jump in straight at level 54, which is Goring Blade. Now Goring Blade will deliver an attack with a potency of 100, and it will also combo off of Riot Blade. And if you do it in the combo, the potency will increase to 390. And you will get a combo bonus, which is a damage over time, with a potency of 85, and that dot will last for 21 seconds. So now you have 2 DPS combos that you have access to, one being damage over time, and one being just straight up damage. And this will change up your single target rotation very slightly, which is kind of cool, because it hasn't changed a lot since 30. Now next up, at level 56, you will get a move called Divine Veil. Now, this one's a little bit strange, and it is a little bit situational, but it is also quite cool. When you use Divine Veil, it will give you the Divine Veil buff. Now, the buff itself doesn't do anything for you. However, if you have the buff up and then you are healed either by yourself or a party member, a protective barrier will be cast on all party members within a radius of 15 yards from you, probably about melee range. Now what that barrier does is it will prevent damage of up to 10% of your maximum health points, or 30 seconds, whichever comes first. Now, you will not get the barrier from Divine Veil, you just pass on a barrier to your teammates. So it is handy to use if you have melee DPS in the group, and get them a bit of a barrier so they're not hit as much. Helps your healers out. Or failing that, if your group needs to stack together to absorb some damage, that is also a good time to use Divine Veil as well. An interesting skill to be sure. Now, next up, at level 58, you will get a spell, which is the first of your magic spells. Because yes, they added magic to Paladin, but not till Stormblood. Not till Stormblood. The level 60 to 70 stuff, that's when you start to get your actual Paladin magic. Now, Clemency. It is a straight out cure spell. Has a cure potency of 1200. It's a canny big cure potency. Now it has an additional effect, which is if you cast Clemency on a party member, you will also receive 50% of the health points that you restored to the target. So you heal them and you get healed at the same time. A fair exchange, really. It is a very powerful heal spell. It increases the survivability of paladins quite substantially. It does, however, cost 4000 MP every time you want to use it, which is where your MP regeneration skills come into play. And one last thing about Clemency, you can use Clemency with Divine Veil in order to pass on the barrier to your teammates. It gives you a little bit more control about when it pops, which is kind of cool. And lastly, at level 60, you will get a trait called Rage of Halone Mastery. Now what that does is that will upgrade your Rage of Halone move into Royal Authority. Now Royal Authority will deliver an attack with a potency of 100. Now it still combos off of Riot Blade, and the combo potency will be boosted to 550. Straight up damage replacement. Very cool animation. Much better than Rage of Halone in my opinion. However, if you are like a lot of the other upgraded skills, if you get synced below level 60, Royal Authority will automatically change back to Rage of Halone. So please be prepared for that one. And that is your level 50 to 60 toolkit. So your level 60 rotation still remains mostly the same. All the previous tanking rules still apply. Mob wise, still use your defensive cooldowns to mitigate some of the damage. Add in Divine Veil when it's worth it, as in use it when your party is going to be close to you. And remember that you can use Clemency to generate the Divine Veil barrier for your group. Otherwise, use the cure when you feel it's necessary, but be aware, some healers take it as an insult when you start healing yourself. I don't really understand why, because it's less strain on them overall. But as weird as it is, some of them get quite passionate about it, and they will let you know. Attack wise, it remains the same. Hit him with Circle of Scorn and your Total Eclipse combos. Boss wise, defensively, same as before. Use Sheltron and Reprise for general damage, and try and keep Sentinel and Rampart for tank busters. Again, don't be afraid to use them outside of tank busters if you really feel that you need it. By all means, use it. Attack wise, you'll be leading off with a Goring Blade combo, and you will try to refresh that at least every 20 seconds to keep that damage over time on them. Once that's up, hit him with Royal Authority combos. You should still be keeping Fight or Flight up as often as you can. hit them with spirits within as much as you can, as before, until they're all dead. Fairly straightforward. So guys, that has been our look into the Paladin. Hopefully it has alleviated any questions you may have had about the job, how it all works, and just tanking in general. Now Rin, thank you again for all the work you've been putting in. It is always appreciated. You've worked really hard. You're welcome. Now I think next up we're doing Warrior. Warrior's coming up next, job wise, and that is the last of the starter classes in the game. And after Warrior, we're going to be jumping into the more advanced jobs, the expansion ones, starting with the Heavensward ones and going from there. You happy about that? You like the new ones, don't you? Now thank you all for watching. If you're new here, feel free to hang out. Come check out some of the stuff we've got going on. We'd love to have you here. If you're not new here, thanks for all the support. It is much appreciated. I love you all from the bottom of my heart, and you know what's coming. Please like, share, comment, subscribe and all that jazz. And as always, shall see you on the flip side. Bye bye.